Imagine the whir of an old tube TV, the faint crackle of static, and then bam! A rhinestone suit lights up the screen, brighter than anything else in the room. The man wearing it grins wide, hair sky high, voice rich with heartache and twang. But before he ever stepped into that spotlight, before the glitz and gospel finales, he was just a butcher's apprentice in a Missouri grocery store, singing between meat orders, dreaming bigger than anyone around him could imagine. This isn't just the story of a country singer. It's the story of a man who stitched his identity into sequins, gave unknown artists their first stage, and turned Sunday gospel into primetime television. From dusty Ozark roots to the Grand Ole Opry, from guiding a young Dolly Parton to becoming a Hall of Fame legend in his own right, Porter Wagoner lived not one life, but many, each more dazzling and complicated than the last. Porter Wagoner was never one to do things halfway. Born in 1927 on a small farm near West Plains, Missouri, he came into the world as the youngest child in a family that made its living in the fields. If you picture rolling hills, dusty roads, and a humble homestead backed by acres of sun-soaked farmland, you'd have the right setting in mind. It was a place where folks believed in hard work, neighborly kindness, and the importance of Sunday service. Porter grew up learning all those lessons, but something in him gravitated toward another calling, something that would pull him away from the fields and lead him toward bright lights, rhinestone jackets, and the powerful magnet that is Nashville, Tennessee. He often said that if he hadn't started out as a butcher, he might never have grabbed hold of his destiny. While he was still quite young, he took a job cutting meat at a local market, a typical small-town gig that let him pay a few bills. Yet from behind that butcher counter, an entire future was quietly taking shape. The store's radio often played local country music broadcasts, and sometimes Porter himself would step away from the meat slicer to perform with his first band, the Blue Ridge Boys, on KUPM-AM. It's said that customers would gather near the back, half smirking, half in awe, as Porter's twangy voice cut through the store's quiet hush. From these modest beginnings, he got the first real taste of what it felt like to connect with an audience, no matter how small. In 1951, his undeniable talent caught the attention of C.C. Mon, a well-connected figure in Ozark entertainment circles who knew a star in the making when he saw one. C hired Porter to perform on KWTO in Springfield, Missouri, a bigger stage than the butcher shop would ever allow. Not long after, that gig led to a coveted recording contract with RCA Victor. For Porter, it was like stepping through a door he'd always known was there, but had never been able to open. This was the real beginning of his professional journey. Signing on the dotted line with a major label was no small feat. He was excited, he was naive, and he was determined. Above all, he was ready to see how far that voice and his unwavering sense of showmanship could take him. Despite the excitement of that new contract, the early 1950s also brought plenty of struggle. Sales of his records weren't exactly red hot. He and his band, in a bid to keep afloat, played countless gigs at schools, halls, and local events, hustling for ticket money that barely covered costs. In 1953, though, he had a small breakthrough that put a glimmer in his eye. He wrote a little tune called Trademark, which Carl Smith turned into a hit. For a moment, it looked like Porter might be stuck behind the scenes as a songwriter, rather than living large in the spotlight. But in 1955, that changed forever. He recorded A Satisfied Mind, and it soared to number one on the country charts. That single track proved to be a revelation. Not only did it announce that Porter Wagoner was a talent in his own right, it gave him a foothold in an industry that otherwise might have left him behind. Suddenly, he wasn't just a skinny guy from the Ozarks with a dream. He was a chart-topping star with a bright future. About that same time, Porter became a fixture on a then newfangled medium, television. The ABC network aired a weekly program called Ozark Jubilee, which put country and gospel performers in front of cameras, beaming their music into living rooms across America. Porter appeared as a regular act, decked out in his flamboyant suits that would soon become his trademark. He performed alongside the Porter Wagoner Trio, featuring Don Warden, who served not only as a bandmate, but would later become Porter's manager, and Speedy Haworth, another talented picker. If you can imagine 1950s television, grainy black and white screens, families huddled around a single set in the living room, then you can picture the swirl of excitement that greeted Porter as a new star. New, despite the show's somewhat limited budget and modest staging, it captured hearts. And with each broadcast, more letters poured in. Who's that fellow with the tall hair and the lively grin? People were drawn to the sincerity in his voice and the sparkle in his eye. In 1957, a pivotal moment arrived. Porter and Don Warden packed up and headed straight for Nashville, the heart of country music. Their goal was the holy grail for any performer with a twang in their soul, the Grand Ole Opry. That iconic stage, with its circle of wood from the old Ryman, beckoned them onward. By the time they stepped inside the Opry's hallowed halls, it felt like destiny was clicking into place. Porter joined the cast officially and would remain there for half a century, a 50-year stretch that saw him transform from a promising newcomer into a bona fide legend. But it wasn't just Opry stardom that sealed Porter's fate. In 1960, he launched a televised variety series called The Porter Wagoner Show. At first, it was aired in black and white, but by 1966, it was in full color, illuminating living rooms every week with shimmering jackets, big hair, and some of the best live country music around. That show ran for 21 years, an astonishing feat in an industry that burns through trends and talents like kindling. Over the course of 686 episodes, it reached around 3 million viewers each week and was broadcast on more than 100 stations across the country. The format was part music concert, part homespun variety show, featuring rotating guest performers, and always capping off with a gospel number at the end. By offering that bit of spiritual reflection, Porter tapped into something deeply ingrained in country's core audience, a sense that music is about more than just entertainment. It's about nourishment for the soul. Early in the show's run, fans saw a rotating cast of skilled backing musicians who dubbed themselves the Wagon Masters. Initially, the lineup included Don Warden on steel guitar, Spec Rhodes on bass, Little Jack Little, and Benny Williams. As the years rolled on, new members joined. Buck Trent with his electric banjo wizardry, Mac McGaha wielding a fiddle that could make audiences gasp, Michael Treadwell, and others. These players defined the sound that audiences quickly recognized as distinctly Porter's brand of country, upbeat, melodic, and unafraid to feature blazing instrumental breakdowns. The stage would crackle with life and the crowd would eat it up. One major turning point occurred in 1967 when Dolly Parton took over from singer Norma Jean as Porter's female co-star on the show. Dolly was an up-and-coming artist then, talented, yes, but largely untested on a national stage. Together, Porter and Dolly became something magical, a pairing that oozed chemistry and charm, a creative duo who turned out one beloved duet after another. Audiences couldn't get enough of their interplay. Dolly's giggling wit, Porter's fatherly warmth, and the easy bantering style that suggested they might be family or dear friends. They scored hits with The Last Thing on My Mind in 1967, Daddy Was an Old-Time Preacher Man in 1970, and Please Don't Stop Loving Me, which soared to number one in 1974. This was the golden era of the Porter Wagoner Show, a time when fans lined up around the block for tapings and local stations boasted about carrying the series. But nothing lasts forever. Dolly's star rose quickly. By 1974, she felt it was time to step out from under Porter's protective wing. She wanted to chart her own course to see how far her talent might take her. Their professional breakup was fraught with tension. Lawsuits and countersuits flew, along with hurt feelings on both sides. In the midst of it all, Dolly penned "I Will Always Love You," a track she wrote as a gentle farewell to Porter. The song would later become an all-time classic, covered by Whitney Houston and earning Dolly countless accolades. For years, Dolly and Porter harbored resentments, but by the late 1980s, they reconciled, each acknowledging the profound impact they'd had on the other's life and career. Meanwhile, Porter's solo recordings continued to make waves. Between the 1960s and 1970s, he chalked up an impressive 81 charting singles, some hitting the top spots and many hovering in the top 10. Tracks like "Misery Loves Company," number 1 in 1962, "Green, Green Grass of Home," number 4 in 1965, "The Cold Hard Facts of Life," number 2 in 1967, and "The Carroll County Accident," number 2 in 1968, propelled him to sustained success. His voice was smooth but carried a gentle ache, a tone that spoke directly to the heartbreak and resilience that anchored so much of country music tradition. As the 1970s morphed into the 1980s, Porter expanded his horizons. Not content to just remain the sequin-clad country singer, he tried new ventures, producing an R&B album for Joe Simon, bridging country with soul in ways few had dared. He even invited James Brown, the godfather of soul himself, to perform at the Grand Ole Opry, a move that ruffled a few feathers among purists, but also showcased Porter's willingness to think outside the typical country box. He dabbled in film, appearing in Clint Eastwood's Honky Tonk Man, and formed a female group called The Right Combination, taking the name from a duet he'd once recorded with Dolly. That group toured for several years, further diversifying Porter's creative portfolio. By the 1990s, he found another niche, hosting Opry backstage on the Nashville network. Standing in front of the cameras again, though now in an interviewer role, Porter welcomed country legends and newcomers alike, bridging multiple generations of artists. Every so often, Dolly would drop by, and they'd share a stage, reminding fans of the synergy that had once lit up the Porter Wagoner Show. Time, it seemed, could mend old wounds, especially when tied together by the enduring power of music. In 2002, Dolly paid him the ultimate tribute when she personally inducted him into the Country Music Hall of Fame. That moment was loaded with emotion. Dolly, once the young starlet under his wing, now stood proudly to honor the man who had helped jumpstart her career while forging his own legend. The audience roared in approval, tears flowed, and cameras flashed. Porter stood there in a typically glitzy suit, beaming with a gratitude he could barely put into words. For him, the Hall of Fame was more than an award. It was validation of a lifetime spent in service to country music. Then, in 2004, he popped up in an unexpected place, HBO's Ali G show, interviewed by none other than the fictional Kazakh journalist Borat Sagdiev. The bizarre, comedic conversation put Porter's gentlemanly nature on full display. Though the segment was humorous and often outlandish, Porter handled it with characteristic grace and good humor. Younger audiences, unfamiliar with his decades of stardom, were suddenly Googling Porter Wagoner to figure out who this intriguing, well-dressed older man was, and discovering a treasure trove of music in the process. 3 years later, in early 2007, at the age of 80, Porter released what would be his final album, Wagon Master. Produced by Marty Stewart for the indie label Anti, it was a bold move. An old-school country icon teaming up with a modern label known for alternative acts. The album earned him some of the best reviews of his career, reminding critics and fans that Porter's artistry still burned bright. He even recorded a music video for Committed to Parkview, a tune penned by the late Johnny Cash. The synergy was poignant. Cash, Dolly, Loretta Lynn, these were members of the same era, a pantheon of country giants, all grappling with mortality yet still forging forward. Porter promoted Wagon Master vigorously, appearing on The Late Show with David Letterman and even opening for rock band The White Stripes at Madison Square Garden. Picture it, a legendary country star in his 80s, stepping onto a stage more associated with modern rock acts and winning over the crowd with the authenticity he'd always carried. It seemed that 2007 would be a year of triumphal finales for Porter. On August 12th, the Grand Ole Opry staged a grand celebration of his 80th birthday and half-century association with the show. Dolly Parton, Marty Stewart, Patty Loveless, and numerous others joined him on stage. The love was palpable, the applause thunderous. For many fans, it felt like a circle had closed. Porter had guided Dolly toward stardom, and now she stood by his side, paying him heartfelt tribute. That night, the Opry's bright lights glistened on Porter's face, and you could sense the waves of gratitude emanating from him. He'd lived a long, eventful life, full of peaks and valleys, heartbreak and redemption. The music had never left him, and the Opry had never let him go. Sadly, just a few months later, on October 28, 2007, Porter Wagoner passed away in Nashville due to lung cancer, surrounded by family and with Dolly close at hand. He was 80 years old. 3 days later, on November 1st, a memorial service was held at the Grand Ole Opry House, the very spot where he'd made such a profound mark. Fans, friends, and colleagues gathered to mourn and celebrate the man in equal measure. He was laid to rest at Woodlawn Memorial Park, another name added to the quiet roll call of country music icons who left behind an everlasting legacy. That boy's name was Porter Wayne Wagoner. He soared higher than he ever dreamed, sometimes crashed, but always got back up, shining in a rhinestone suit under the spotlight. For over half a century, millions tuned in to watch and hear him, often forgetting their troubles as they leaned forward to catch every note he sang. His legacy is more than a collection of hits. It's an entire era of country music, immortalized in the flourish of a nudie suit, the hush of an Opry crowd, the sweet refrain of a gospel song at the close of his weekly television show. He was the ambassador of an art form rooted in fiddles and family farms, yet he never stopped pushing it forward into new frontiers. Even in the final months of his life, that fire to entertain and connect with people never dimmed. Ask Dolly Parton or Marty Stewart or any of the thousands of artists who took the stage after him. Porter's generosity and flair paved the way for them all. He taught the world that country music could sparkle just as brightly as pop or rock, that it could be down home and decked out all at once. And so here's to Porter Wagoner, the man who walked on stage with unshakable confidence, belting out heartbreak songs in a voice that made listeners feel he was singing just for them, and who ended every show with a reverent turn toward the divine. He was a paradox of humble beginnings and showy style, of tradition and innovation, a paradox that worked, that charmed, that defined the soundtrack of a generation. When we remember him, we remember the heart of country music itself, forever shining under those stage lights he so faithfully called home.